Hi, I'm Tim. I'm going to walk you through the Kelly Zero build today. If you saw in a previous article, I did the Corsair with the folded fuselage, and I decided I wanted to make that a little more scale and go to the round fuselage, so I picked the Zero, and it's got the nice rounded fuselage. I also added flaps as well to this one, which we will not do in the build. So let's get started. Now's a good time to get your power pod built. If you don't have one, there's a link below at the bottom. And also get your servos arms installed and centered. And we're using 4 servos for the standard Zero and 6 servos if you decide to use the optional flaps. To build the A6M Zero, we're going to need the plans. We need 4 sheets of foam board, skewer, craft stick, paint stick, a couple of main wheels and a tail wheel, and some rod to fasten them to the fuselage. A couple things before we get started. The plans are done in typical flight test fashion. Black is a full cut, red is a 50% score cut, blue is a location line, or in some cases a future cut on the fuselage or wing. There is one exception to this that is important to note, and that is on the power pod plate, right at the end, the red cut is a 50% score cut on this side. The blue cut is actually a 50% score cut on the back side. So that's very important too, for that one note there. So let's go ahead and get our pieces cut out. Notice that the fuselage plans are longer than one sheet of foam board. So what I do is take and butt up tightly a second piece, tape the top side there, and then just fold the plans over and cut it out. The other thing that you want to decide before you cut out the wings is if you're going to put in the optional flaps or not. In this build I'm going to show the locations of the flaps and how to install them, but I will not actually be installing flaps in this particular model. Now that we've got the fuselage cut out, ready to go, we'll start with that. The first thing we're going to do is we have these 3 little pieces here that we taped to make the fuselage long enough. We're going to flip that over, and one at a time we're just going to hot glue those seams. Press them together. Take a piece of scrap foam, clean them off. Once those are cooled, we're going to come around to this edge and remove the excess here. And then one final item for the fuselage piece. We're going to remove all the paper on the inside. Now that we've got the paper peeled off the back, I'm going to take and bevel these 4 edges a little bit to make it meet together better. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just take a little bit off. Now that I've got these beveled, I'm going to set that aside for a minute and work on the power pod plate. For the power pod plate, we need to remove this section right here in the front. We'll remove this section right here. We have to be careful because on the back side, remember, we have our other section that we'll remove as well. It folds the opposite way. Gotta be careful to remove that paper there. And this paper on this side. Get that little piece out of there. So this will fold down like this. So we have that angle to it. Okay, and the front will fold over and underneath. Go ahead and add our hot glue here. Here. Fold that over. Push down on that, make sure we have a nice square edge on the front of the power pot plate. That looks beautiful. Now we'll put our glue along here. And we'll fold this up, 90-degree angle. Make sure that's nice and square. Once that's cooled, we'll take our glue and put it here. Fold this back down so we have another 90-degree angle there. This little offset allows us to get around the stabilizer elevator. Okay, and there's our power pod plate. Next step is to take our power pod plate and the folded over pieces on the bottom. We want the top edge facing up with our offset going down. I'm going to take and trim. I'm going to bevel all the top edges, including the little tabs. So just take and trim all of these edges off, all the way around. And once we've got all the edges beveled, we're ready to install it onto the fuselage. So we'll get our fuselage back, and what we want to do is we want to roll this, pre-form it a little bit so it'll stay round. So we just take and gently start working it holding it with one hand on the bottom and the back hand. And we want to do this all the way down each piece of the fuselage. And we'll just continue doing this until we get a nice round shape. Alright, one more thing before we install the power pod plate. I want to take the reinforcement discs. I like using these because if you change your power pod out frequently, it really saves your fuselage side. And I've pre-formed them a little also already, so that they roll with the fuselage. Take the skewer and clean that out. So that'll take a nice rolled shape. And we'll do the other one. nicely. Okay, now that we have the reinforcement discs in, I'm going to take and hold a straight edge. We're going to pre-bend these just a little bit, so when we roll it together they'll come towards the middle easier. So we'll just bend those up. And you'll notice it takes a little bit of the roll out of it, but it'll come right back when we roll it around. Now we take and test fit our power pod plate. And it's going to lean to the back when we do that. And it looks nice. Then we're going to install the power pod plate. So make sure we have plenty of glue. And we'll run a bead right along here. Leans back quite an angle. So we'll take our former, our rear former, and add just a little bit of glue to the top corners. We don't want to glue the whole thing in because we're going to take it back out, but this will help us hold the shape while we're assembling it. And we'll let that cool. Once that's cooled, we're going to take our front former, and we've already marked on one side the edge. That'll be the front, so we can see it. We're going to take our rear template, put it on the front one, and make a mark on the back side. Just the same as that. This is our line that goes on the power pod plate. So we're going to add a little glue just on the sides here, and a little bit here on the end where it sticks down. And we're going to line that line up with the top of our power pod plate. Once that's cooled, we're going to take and glue both the front former and along the power pod plate just to the rear former. And across here. Now we're going to take and roll this fuselage. I put back pressure here and use the table. And roll it around. I've test fitted this. I'm going to test fit it before you roll it, but that'll roll right around into those tabs, those slots on the power pod plate. And then we want to hold nice firm pressure on that front former. I'm going to make sure the top of the fuselage is here as we push in a little to help continue that shape. Now we're going to glue on our little former for the back top of the fuselage. Just put some glue along this edge. And it just sets in here right near the back of the top piece. And once that is cooled, we're going to go ahead and test fit our front piece. It should come around and just line up perfectly there. So we'll add glue to both the top former here and across the edge of the fuselage here. Alright, and we'll roll this around, and we want to make sure that it lines up with the face of the fuselage. So it's nice and square, and that this edge touches all along there nicely. Very good. And we just hold that till it cools. Give it plenty of time. We don't want this popping off. And to finish off the fuselage front, we're going to take and apply a bead of glue under this flat. And just press it over and glue it down. Now we're going to turn our attention to the rear of the fuselage. We've already glued to this point, so now we're going to continue the glue all the way back to the back of the power pod plate on this right side. Press this together, and we want this power pod plate just to be about 3/16 of an inch below the edge of where the stabilizer sits. I'm going to set this on the table and apply some pressure. We'll hold that till it dries. Now before we glue the other side to the power pod plate, we need to install our servo, and we have our servo arm hole here for it. Before we install it, we want to make sure we scratch this servo up really well so that it takes the glue. I think on the prototype I did of the Zero, one of the servos I forgot to do that, and it came loose during the flight, fortunately with not too much consequences. But we're going to make sure that's nice and rough for the glue to stick to. And then I take a pretty long extension so that that'll reach all the way up to the front. And we'll even take a little bit of tape just to make sure that extension doesn't come off of there. This would be pretty bad if the elevator servo wasn't functional. So now we'll take our extension, we'll feed it down into the fuselage, and we'll take our servo, we'll add some hot glue to it, and we're going to center our servo arm right in the middle of the slot for it. Nice bead of glue. Can reach in here, feed that right in. Kind of squish it around a little bit, make sure it ends up nice and centered in the slot there, and parallel as well. Now that that's firmly in place, we're going to go ahead and glue along the power pod plate all the way to the rear and attach this other side. Make sure we have glue, and here we go. Make sure the tab lines up. Make sure we're just about a 3/16 of an inch down on this other side here, so we match the first side. We're going to squeeze that down against the table. Squeeze that Hold it nice and tight. Once that's done, we're going to go back here to the back, and right at the tip we're going to trim just a little bit of foam off of each of these so they come out right to a point. And just kind of a sawing motion here. Trim those back so that we can take these and bring them to a nice point right at the tip. And we're happy with that. We'll go ahead and put some glue on that. Alright, put some glue in there to hold those together. And nice and even. And the glue's kind of hot. Watch your fingers. I'm going to make sure this stays nice and even while that's cooling off. You can even sight down it. Make sure we're nice and level. Let me hold that. It's important to get this level so that we don't induce any twist in the back of the fuselage. That way our stabilizer will be straight. Now we'll turn our attention to the bottom of the fuselage, and we're going to concentrate just up to this first corner here on both sides. We'll get that set, and then we'll work from there back on either side, one at a time. So watch your fingers. And just go from the first corner up here to the center. Squeeze that so it maintains some of the roundness. Good amount of time to cool down before we release it. Want that seam to be nice and solid. So we'll start from that point and just work our way on down 6 or 8 inches. That way we can hold this edge. And yes, the glue is hot. Be careful. We want to squeeze it a little bit as it cools to help form a little bit of a round bottom. It won't stay totally round, but it will add to it. Now we'll do the other side. Again, we'll get the glue here, and as we put this together, we'll squeeze this piece, the bottom, so we continue to form that rounded edge. Now we're just going to continue on down the fuselage one side at a time and get the bottom glued in. Really want to work this bottom piece to try to get some curvature, so as we glue it, we're going to kind of keep the squeeze on to maintain a little bit of the rounded curvature to the bottom. If you need to, you can work in sections, one side, the other side, so far down, then finish it up. So I think we'll do that. We'll start here, and we'll take it about 6 inches or so. Squeeze that together, and be careful, the glue is hot. So we'll go ahead and finish this off by running this all the way down. If you have an extra set of hands available, it's nice, but it can be done without. Again, watch the hot glue, but match that up all the way down back of the fuselage. Alright, and we'll finish off with this last side here. Push the glue into the seam. Alright, now we have the back of the fuselage all glued together. And we can turn our attention back to the front. We're going to take and trim out this center piece that we've had marked from previous, and we'll reach in and take out the former as well. So, go ahead and cut this out. Be careful of the power pod plate that you don't cut it. Remove the center section. There we have the center cut out. Now we'll reach back through and give this a good punch. And we'll twist, and we'll pull it out. There we go. Now we have a clear area for our wings to go through. And our fuselage at this point is basically done. Alright, now we're going to install the tail surfaces of our elevator and stabilizer and our vertical stabilizer and rudder. And first we're going to crack that seam open. We're going to trim our 45 on the rudder. And we're going to trim a 45 on this edge of the rudder as well. So there's the minimal amount of interference. You can trim a little extra along the edge if you feel you need it. We'll take our hot glue and reinforce that hinge line. Scrape most of it back off. We'll do the same thing for the elevator. This back, we're going to trim the elevator to 45. If you don't get it all the first time, you can go back, get a little bit more. Try not to cut too deep to the top plate. There we go. We'll throw there. And we'll put our hinge seam on here. And take off the excess. That'll stiffen it up so it'll last a lot longer. And we'll let that cool. Piece that we're going to need is this little tail piece here, and we're going to remove the paper on the underside just back to where the notch is. Just score that. And peel the paper off. There we go. And then we're going to curve this around to match the back of the fuselage. And we're also going to take and trim, very carefully trim that down so it comes down just to the point, like that. And you may find that you need to trim these edges a little if they interfere with the elevator coming through there. Might want to trim it just a little bit. So let's do that. Let's trim just a little bit off. All three sides. Okay. Now that should provide just enough where it won't be interfering. There. Can test fit this on the rudder. And once this is cooled enough, before we mount the stabilizer on, we're going to take a little piece of craft stick and glue it right across the gap here, just to give us a little stability between each side of the elevator. We want to make sure not to interfere with where our control horn is going to go. We can test fit it also on here. Okay. Now we're going to glue this assembly together, not the rear piece yet. We're going to glue this assembly together, and we'll need our 90-degree to make sure that we get it nice and straight. So let's go ahead and apply the glue here and here, and just back to the rudder, not any further. Place. Take our 90-degree, make sure it lines up perfectly. Let that give it plenty of time to cool. We're going to apply a bead of glue just along each side, just back to the elevator. Take a scrap piece and wipe off the excess, just like that. Now when you go to test fit it on here, we can set it in place, make sure that it fits, and then we need to take and sight down to make sure that the stabilizer here in the back, I want to make sure that the stabilizer is parallel with the front of this power pod plate. If there's any twisting in the back here that didn't get lined up just right, we want to be able to fix that. So we're going to line the elevator stabilizer with the front of the power pod plate. And actually mine was off just a hair, so I had to trim just a little bit off of one side, right here, just to get it to line up perfectly. We want this really square with the front, and we're going to line the wing up with that same data line. So once that is in place and lined up good, then we can take our tail piece and fit it to the tail. So we'll pull this back off. We're going to insert it in here just temporarily. I'm going to make sure this all lines up. And then we'll glue this in place. And I'm going to hold it down, take the rudder off, and just make a line there so I know where to glue to. And I'm going to glue this in place and then get the rudder set quickly so that it makes sure it lines up properly. But I've got my line so I know where a good starting point is. And then we'll set this on and test fit it. Make sure it sits down just like it's supposed to. Right there. Squeeze that in a little bit. Hold it till it cools down, and then we'll glue the stabilizer. Alright, take that back off. And one final step. Make sure that we cut out our notches here for the elevator. And this will take out a little bit of the power pod plate, and that's okay. And now that we have our notch cut out for our elevator, we'll go ahead and glue it in place. We've lined it up, we've checked it. I'm going to glue it along here. And remember to get the rudder here as well. Line that up. Get that in place, and then we're going to make sure that we're square or parallel with that, the front of the power pod plate. Now that we have our elevator, stabilizer, and rudder in place, the last thing to do with the fuselage part is to take our rear former and glue it in place. And we're going to test fit it. Make sure it fits in there snugly. That looks good. Pull it out, put a little glue on the sides here. And right along the bottom. And get this back in place. And squeeze in on the sides against that former so it holds shape there near the rear of the fuselage. That way the turtle deck will wrap over it quite nicely. Alright, now we're going to continue on with our wings. We have our two wing panels, our two main spars. We have our three little pieces each for the rear spar due to the flaps being there. On each wing panel we have our main cut between the top and the bottom of the wing, and then the two score cuts and our aileron, and if we're putting flaps in, we would have the flap there as well. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and do the leading edge. We'll fold that over, and we'll go ahead and make our bevel cuts for the leading edge. Careful not to cut all the way into the middle. It's a nice sharp blade. And we'll flip it over and do the other side, and we'll just start right from here where the bottom part of the wing is and do the same cut. You can always come back and trim a little more if we need to. Like right here, didn't get quite enough. There we go. And then for our score cuts, we'll just take a piece of skewer and run down just to open that up a little bit. So when we fold the wing, it'll give it a little contour right there. And we'll go ahead and do our beveled edge for our aileron. We'll bevel this on the aileron side. And again, if we had flaps we were putting in on this, we would go ahead and bevel the score cut on the hinge point of the flap. In this one, I'm not going to actually put the flaps in. Once we have that ready, we can take our main spar, and we'll fold it over and we'll test fit. Kind of squeeze in here just a little bit. And this should go all the way to the edge, or slightly past it. It's right at the edge. Looks like that's going to fit, so we'll apply glue and install our main spar. Run a bead of glue down the spar. Press and hold. Once that's cooled, we'll apply glue here to the bottom. And install it in the bottom of the wing. Press firmly and hold. Now at this point, if we were installing flaps on it, we would go ahead and install the servo for the flaps, and it's marked on the plans with a little slot for your servo arm to stick through, and the servo would be glued right up against the back of the spar, centered on the servo arm hole, and we just put some glue on there after removing the sticker and roughing it up. We just stick it in there right like that, and that would be ready for our flap. In this model I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use the ones for the ailerons. So now we'll take our wing and we'll use a rocking motion and work this over to give us a nice leading edge. Bring it down. We want this center section here to be parallel with the spar, so it sits right on top of the spar. And once we have that and we're satisfied with it, we're going to go ahead and glue in our piece of paint stick for our landing gear support. So we take our piece of paint stick, apply glue to one side, and apply it right over the score cut for our landing gear. Once that's in place, we're ready to go ahead and glue our wing over. So we're going to apply glue here on the leading edge, and we're going to apply a little bead of glue right here on the first score cut and on the top of the spar. So make sure we have plenty of glue handy, and here we go. Nice healthy bead on the front. Press this up against that score cut and along the top of the main spar. Fold this over. Make sure that we're nice and square on top of that spar. Hold this for a good minute, at least. Make sure that sets up nice. You want to kind of keep pressure on the front leading edge all the way down, just to keep the wing from being able to warp a little bit. If you've got pressure there, that'll make a nice straight wing. Once that's cooled off, we're going to take this wing and fold it back and install our rear spars. You notice there's 3 different sizes. Pretty evident which one goes where. Right there, we'll just go ahead and glue them in place. Bring them right up to the trailing edge of the bottom of the wing. And I leave just a little gap between where the flap would be if we were installing flaps and the edge of the spar, just to give us less chance of interference. And we'll do the same for the other two. Right up to that rear edge. And the last one. Once this is cooled, we're going to take a craft stick, bring it to the edge of the table, and we'll just press down on the trailing edge of those rear spars. I'll let the wing, when it folds over, come down as far as it should. This centerpiece doesn't need to be near as much because it's not quite out as far as the two rear pieces. So that allows, when this comes over, the trailing edge will sit nice and flush against the table there. Alright, now we can go ahead and apply glue along this seam and our 3 pieces of rear spar. Nice piece of glue there, and each one of these. Set that against the table. Press firmly all the way across. When you're pressing this down, go ahead and, with your fingertips, hold the front of the wing, the leading edge, nice and tight against the table. That'll help maintain a nice flat, straight wing so that you don't have any twist to it. Once that's cooled, you should have a nice airfoil there. You'll notice that the top edge of the center section is nice and flush with this main spar. And finally, we'll go ahead and put our bead of glue on the hinge point here, wipe off the excess to strengthen up the aileron hinge. Just like that. Alright, this wing's about ready. One more thing we'll do is, because of the interference right here on this cut, I'll take up the little piece of skewer, just poke it there and kind of drag it through just a little bit, top and bottom. And that just releases the interference, or most of it anyway. And now that we have the first wing done, we'll go ahead and assemble the second one in exactly the same manner. Alright, now that we've got our wings assembled, I've gone ahead and cut out the reliefs for the servo leads to come through. So we have our 2 wings and our dihedral gauge, and I really like the idea that Peter had, putting the little stand on it that makes this process a whole lot easier. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip the wings over and put that bottom edge nice and tight together. We'll put a little piece of tape along there to hold it. So we'll butt that up, make sure we're nice and even on the front as well as the back, hold it together, and there we go. Nice tight seam. With that on there, I'm going to flip it over, and you can see there's a little gap there. So we're going to take our dihedral gauge under the wingtip and push it down. That gap comes right together. quite nicely. So now we'll take our hot glue and we'll fold this back the other way. And we'll put a bead of glue along the bottom. On the main spars, top edges, both sides. All the way to there. Now we'll push this down. Get our dihedral gauge under the end of the wing. Press firmly down, take a piece of scrap, and we'll smooth out the excess that squeezes out. We want to hold this a good couple minutes to make sure that cools really well. Once that's cooled, we're going to take a piece of tape, or a couple of pieces, just to reinforce this a little bit on the top side of the wing. Since it'll be in the fuselage, you won't see the tape anyway. There we go. Just like that. And here's our wing for the Zero. Alright, now that we have our fuselage ready, our wing is ready, we'll attach the wing to the fuselage. Before we do that, we need to make the openings here in the bottom of the fuselage for the wing to slide through. Because of this joint coming back in the fuselage here, we weren't able to cut that initially, so we'll use our pattern to do that now. So we've got our wing tip mark and our bottom mark here, so we're going to line that up with those two lines, and then we'll trace out the rest of the wing. Just make sure we've got it. Traced out, and then we'll go ahead and take our knife, and now we'll open up this opening. The wing's going to go through this way, so we don't want to cut directly perpendicular. We want to cut a little bit at an angle to help the wing slide through. Do that same angle here with the bottom. You can always open it up a little more, so I would err to the small side so that you have a nice tight fit with the wing when you slide it through. Alright, and there's our initial wing opening for one side, and we'll just flip it over and repeat the process for the other side. And the trailing edge of the wing should be right on the joint there on the fuselage. So we'll trace this out. Alright. Now we have our two openings for our wing cut out. We're ready to slide the wing through. So to get the wing through, the easiest way, I roll this up on the table and get the stabilizer off the edge. Want the wing towards the outside of the table, so when we slide it down we don't hit the table. And we'll take one side and just ease it in there. Just kind of a gentle push, slight rocking motion, and that should just slide right on through, right there. And we'll pick it up. We want to look at it, make sure that our center of our wing is right in the bottom of the fuselage, both on the front and the back. And before we glue that in place, what I like to do is set it down on its nose. That gives us a nice flat surface to measure off of, and then take a tape measure and measure to the wingtip at the second score cut, and make sure that those are the same on both sides. That'll give us a nice square wing. Alright, once we know our wing is square and that we're centered in the fuselage, then we're going to go ahead and glue our wing in place. So make sure we have enough hot glue handy. I'm going to start on the bottom side. And we'll just run a nice bead across the bottom of the wing here. Scrape off our excess. And we'll do the other side as well. And I'll go ahead and let that cool before I do the top side. Now that the bottom side is cooled, we'll flip it over and do the two top sides. Make sure we have plenty of glue. And run a bead down right in the corner there. And unfortunately you can't see this from that view. I apologize. Right down there, and one right down here. And we'll scrape that off. Right into the corner. Just like that. And we'll let that cool. Now we'll turn our attention to the landing gear, and we have our landing gear wire. We're going to start 1.25 inches from the end. I'm going to make a 90-degree bend. And we're going to go 2.25. We're going to bend it so that it comes forward as we bend. We're going to go 90 degrees. But you can see that if this is flat, this actually angles forward, and we can adjust that a little bit if it's not quite right when we get done. Then we're going to go 4.25. And we're going to bend it back this way, back along the same line as the top one. Again, we can adjust that a little bit once we get it on the plane. And then we're going to take the last measurement, 1.25 inches, and we'll cut this off. And so it should look something like this. We'll do the same process for the next one. We'll just make sure that we bend the opposite direction. So we go 1.25 inches, make a 90-degree, and we're going to go 2.25. This time we're going to bend it down this way so it faces the opposite direction. 4.25. And we bend it back the same direction as this one. And we cut it off at 1.25 inches. Alright, so here is our 2 landing gear struts, which we can adjust slightly once we get them installed on the plane. So the last bend I got pointing the wrong direction. It actually needs to turn 90 degrees so that it points the same direction as the very first segment. So it should look like this, and we'll install on the plane like this. So we'll do that for both of these. Got to twist it over 90 degrees, and then that will install like this. Alright, so our next step then is to actually install them to the aircraft. Now we can attach our landing gear to the aircraft. And the longest arm is the one that comes down, and that will come to the front a little bit. So we have our score mark where we made the landing gear to go, and this back piece of that is going to go right across the front of the spar there. So we'll set it there, and I like to take a marker and just kind of give it a little outline of where that goes. And then we'll open that up, and I cut inside those lines so it'll squish down in there, be tight fit, but still be open enough so it'll slide down in fairly easy. So bring that on out. That. The easiest way I found to get that out is to use our skewer and then just kind of dig that out between the cuts. It doesn't all have to come out, but you get enough that the landing gear leg will fit down in there. Alright. Test fit our gear leg. set down in there, so open this up just a little more towards the leading edge. Like that. And then we'll do the other side. So once we have the cutouts cut into the bottom of the wing, we can set the landing gear in the frame. And then we need to adjust them so that they come out. So they come out about the same angle this way forward, so that they're pretty much perpendicular this way, and then both gear come across and meet each other in the middle. We can adjust that a little bit right at the end of the build. But they're ready to, I've got them adjusted to set in place, so now all we need to do is glue them in. So we'll pull it out, apply our hot glue, and we'll fit this back in there, push it down good and tight. And we'll go over the top with some hot glue. And we'll take a piece of scrap just to smooth it out. And we'll do the other side just the same. Once the landing gear is cooled, we can flip it over, set it down, make sure that our legs are coming straight down, our landing gear, and that they're pointed right towards each other, and that they slope forward the same amount on each side. Once we've done that, got that adjusted, we want to make sure that these bottom legs lay just flat right on the table. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and install our wheels, and we'll put some hot glue on the ends to hold them in place. Once we have the main landing gear in, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the reliefs here on the bottom of the fuselage. The ends should be pre-cut through. And now all we have to do is cut out the sides, allow for cooling air to go through. We'll install our tail wheel, and I just use a piece of push rod, and we'll just push it through, get about halfway, mark that with our finger, and then bend to 90 degree. And mark the other side. Give just a little bit of wiggle room there. And we'll bend this up. Now we have a U-shaped piece, and I like to come up here near the top and come in just a little bit. And then, this is barely long enough, but it'll work. We're going to take this and bend straight forward with both of these sides right at the same point. We can adjust that a little bit if we need to. Looks like I need to. A little twist. What I want is those to head straight forward. Now that we have this U shape with a couple tabs pointing forward, we'll just take this and we're going to poke it in through the first layer of foam right underneath the elevator hinge. Poke a couple of holes in there. Get that started. We'll just feed that right up inside. Make sure it's nice and level, and then we'll just glue that in place. Will be the glue. This piece of scrap to push it down in there and smooth it out. Make sure that it's square with the front wheels. And there's our tail wheel. And the rudder has plenty of control to steer it on the runway. Alright, once that's cooled, we'll flip it back over on the gear. And we're ready to move on to the next step. So we're going to put our power pod in place, put our skewer in the back, and then with another pointed skewer we're going to make our holes to hold the front of it. Hold up really tight. Kind of mark the spots where they go. And then we'll remove the power pod plate out. And then we'll get these center nice and straight as they go in. So we use those holes and make sure they go in nice and straight. Like that. Then we'll take our skewer and we'll cut off about 1.5 inch pieces that we'll glue into place. So we'll test fit this. Let's go ahead and round this off just a little bit. Alright. Test fit that in there. This one. Make sure they're nice and straight. And go ahead and hot glue them in place. Push some hot glue into the hole. Slide that back. And we'll do the other one. Hot glue in the hole. Slide that in like that. Let them stick out about 1/2 inch or so. Now it's time to add our electronics to the aircraft. We're going to start with the rudder servo, and if you had it marked on your plans, you can just cut out a little notch there for it in front of this rear bulkhead. And depending on your servo, you might have to enlarge that just a little bit to match your servo. Trim that out a little bit. Now we'll install our servo. It's right in there. Then we're going to take our linkage and kind of rest it right up against the servo, pointed right to the back of the rudder. I'm going to put it up against our bulkhead. And use our bulkhead to guide that through. So we have the one bulkhead. Going to be fairly close, but not up against the stabilizer. And we want to make sure we're aiming towards the right place. Alright, there you can see we're coming right up to where we're going to put our horn. And that'll stabilize our push rod since the servo is so far forward. Next we'll take a little zip tie. We'll use this to help support it in the rear here. So we'll pull that up just about as tight as it'll go. Make sure it slides in there. Tighten it up where it still slides. And then we're going to cut it off just about a 1/2 inch or so, kind of an angle so it's got a little point to it. And then with that point, we're going to go right about the rear attach from the fuselage, right in line with the this, where the horn's going to be. And that'll give us our third support. So we're supported all the way back. Then we'll take our servo horn, slide the wire out of the way for now. And we have our notch here in the back of our rudder. I'm going to take a skewer and just drag that through there a little bit. I like to open it up just a hair on this side. Makes the horn fit in nicer. So we'll feed the horn in, making sure our holes line up right on the hinge point there. Alright, so once we're happy with that, bring our rod back. I'm going to go ahead and attach it now to the servo. Feed it through there. So that it comes off on the top of the servo. Feed our servo back in the hole, just like that. And mark our rod so it lines up right with the hole there. Then we're going to take our needle nose and hold that and bend straight up, right on that mark. I like to do this with the servo already attached so that I make sure that this bend is oriented in the right direction. So bend it up. And we'll take our pliers here, which will make our Z bend. Like that. Check and make sure when we're centered, we're over the arm. Once we're happy with that, I'll go ahead and trim this off. Give it about a 1/4 inch or so past the Z-bend. I'm going to take our control horn and we're going to feed it through from the bottom. In there like that. We'll test fit it. Make sure we like that. And then we'll go ahead and put some hot glue in the rudder and fasten that in place. Nice and straight, centered over the hinge line. Once that's cooled and we're happy with that, we're going to go ahead and glue in our servo. Just a little bit of glue in front and back. Set that down in there. And we'll just double check and make sure we're as straight as we can be. And then the final step will be to add a little bit of glue to this zip tie, the hole that we're going to stick it through here. A little spot of glue there. And that'll keep it from flexing. We'll flip the plane over and we'll work on the elevator. We'll take our servo horn and test fit it. Make sure it fits in there properly. We'll use a control rod with the Z-bend there. We'll line this up nice and straight. We'll mark where we want it to bend. And we'll create our Z-bend right here. Just bend it out. And then we'll bend it back. Look at that, make sure that's where we want it. And we'll trim it off. Then we can take our control horn and feed it through. We'll test fit it one more time. Make sure we like how that looks. And we'll go ahead and glue the horn in place. So that's cool. We're going to take another zip tie, loop it around here and tighten it up. Make sure it slides nicely. Then we're going to trim it off. About a ½ an inch length or so. Then we're going to take about the center of the length of that rod and make sure it's nice and straight. And we'll use that to poke a hole there so that fits in there just like that. Looks nice and straight. Come back with just a spot of hot glue. And we'll put our guide right in there. Just like that. Alright, once we have that done, we'll reach in here and grab our servo lead for our rudder and put our extension on it, making sure we keep black to black and neutral to neutral. A little tape to secure it so it doesn't come apart. Cross over both ends of the wires. Take our extension and feed it up towards the front. Now, once we have the tail well done, we'll start on our wings. Now we'll turn our attention to our ailerons, linkages, and servos. I like to use just a piece of weed eater twine and take from inside the hole for the leads, which is already in the wing there. And I do this afterwards because it's a little easier to feed the wing on without those wires being in the way. So we'll just feed that weed eater line right down the end here. And we'll take the end of that, pull it out a little bit. attach our servo wire to that. So we have our servo, and we have an extension, and we'll hook these up, and we'll go ahead and tape them so they don't come apart as we feed them through there. And we'll take a piece of tape and attach the end of the lead extension to this. We'll tape our extension to that weed eater string, and we'll just pull it right up through the wing. Once we've got it fed through the wing, we'll go ahead and test fit it in here. And once we're happy with that, go ahead and mark up the back side. That way the hot glue will stick better. We'll apply some hot glue. And slide it right back into place. And we'll let that cool. Now if we had the servos for the flaps, if we had installed flaps on this model, those would already be sticking through the wing, and we would just be ready to put a Y harness and plug those into the receiver. Once that's cooled, we'll go ahead and take our skewer and open up our slot for our horn, our control horn, and test fit it, making sure the holes line up with the hinge line. Then we'll take our control rod, feed it through there. We'll mark that, make sure aileron is centered. We know our horn is already centered. And we'll take our pliers. So now that we've got our electronics installed, we'll turn our attention to the rear turtle deck. And we'll take this piece, and I pre-curved the poster board a little bit first on the edge of the table just to give you some help starting that. And then slide it on there, and you'll notice that you have to make a little slit for the control rod to come through, and it's about an inch, inch and a quarter from the back. So we'll test fit it first, slide it all the way back, put this under the control rod there on the end, make sure we line up here. We're going to attach the back portion first, and then we'll work on the front portion. So now that we're happy with the fit, I'm going to go ahead and pull it back off. And I'm going to apply just a little bit of glue here and here, just to hold it centered while I work on the sides. So we'll give it just a little spot there. Spot there. Slide it back in place. Make sure it's centered. Hold that down, let it cool down a little bit. I also like to put something underneath the tail wheel while I'm working on this, because I'm applying a little pressure and I don't want to push the tail wheel into the fuselage. So once that's cooled, then I'm going to start with a bead of glue along the base here and the top. So we'll go ahead and put our bead of glue along. We'll just do one side at a time. Down that former. And we'll roll that over. And the glue is hot, so be careful. Hold that in place and let it cool down. If that's cool, we'll go ahead and take this rear piece, tuck it up under there. Make sure we have a little bit of a curve to that, so we don't have interference. There we go. And then I'm going to put a spot of glue here. I'm going to put just a spot of glue here to hold that in place. And now we'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. And now that we have the back done, we're going to put a bead across here and down one side and hold that, and we'll do the other side. Halfway. And we'll come right up this edge here. Curl that over, kind of hold it on both sides. Make sure it stays even. And we'll hold that down until it cools. Once that's cooled, we'll do the exact same thing to the other side. Now that we have the rear turtle deck applied, I'm going to turn our attention to the canopy. We have the canopy top, canopy front, canopy rear, and our two formers. We're going to start with our top, and I pre-bend it, go over the edge of the table, put some nice bend in it. With that, we'll test and make sure it goes from one side to the other. Once we're happy with that, we'll go ahead and apply glue on the former. And then take our canopy top, line it up, and install it onto the former. Once that has a chance to cool, we'll apply the other one to the opposite side. Now this fits centered on the fuselage, with the center of the canopy being right about the center of this rear bend in the wing. And once we're happy with that, we'll just go ahead and apply glue and put it in place. Centered. Make sure it's square and centered on top of the fuselage. And it'll set right there. Now we're going to take our front windshield, which we pre-bent a little bit, and test fit it, make sure it sits on there nicely. And we're going to go ahead and take and apply glue, and I just do this all in one step and just hold it. It'll set. So you apply a little bead of glue all the way around the edges. Get it lined up. Just over the edge of the center. And then just press and hold in place. Now for the rear canopy, we'll pre-bend shape into it so it helps hold the shape. We'll test fit it, just overlap it just slightly. And once we're satisfied with that, we'll do the same thing. We'll go ahead and add a bead of glue right on the edge, all the way around. Carefully stick it down, get it lined up on one side and center. Remember the glue is hot, so be careful. Okay, we've got it all assembled, got our power pod in place. Let's go check it out, see how it flies. We're here at the Flagstaff Flyers Field, elevation 6,000 feet. Let's go flying.